All right, we're ready to go.
Great. Oh, I have to dismiss this. Okay, very good. All right. Again, so we're going to structure a little bit of this. What we did is put together these materials based on some of the things that we did in our last webinar. Many of you some of you may be new to the webinar series. Largely, we've been focused on the NIFA Reporting System NRS development that deal with Hatch Multi-State, Evans-Allen, Smith-Lever, and 1890 extension. But recently, in our release last week, we added the other major reporting funding lines that NIFA requires people to submit initiations and progress reports and report. All of those are now in NRS. So that also includes McIntyre-Stennis, Renewable Research Energy Act, RREA, and Animal Health and Disease Research. So now we're all under one house in terms of initiating capacity funded programs and then tracking and reporting against them. So that happened last week, and we're here to talk a little bit about that, refresh people, give them updates, and allow you to ask questions. We, of course, also have a new process for those who haven't been in the system before, or it's been a long time since you've registered for a NIFA or USDA system. We are complying with USDA's security policies and best practices. We're using something called EAuthentication, which enables us to register you in NRS. The extra step here, the thing to think about, is that we're making sure that you are who you say you are through an identity verification process because USDA requires it. So that applies to anyone who's going to do business with NIFA and USDA. So we're just catching up to that with this application. It's a relatively painless process, but of course, we always know that those things take a little bit of energy and a little bit of thought, especially because they're going to ask you questions about who things that only you would know. We don't need to get into it here, but certainly talk to people who've been through it, talk to other organizations if this is new for you or for your folks. I think you'll find that it's actually not too difficult. If you fail the identity verification process, or if there's not enough information for them to establish that, yes, there is a manual process, or you could opt to do it. And we know that can be, difficult because you have to go in person. So, but that's an alternative in our opinion. You can take an online quiz, should take you a couple minutes, and you're through the door. And we'll talk about this here throughout the seminar, or the webinar, but we don't feel like you have to do this all right now. When should you go into NRS? Well, when you have to do a transaction, when you have to do something related to one of your research projects or your extension programs. We do want to leave it up to each institution. It's certainly up to the offices, who are administering the grant programs to let you know how the university would like you to approach this. They may want you to get going now. Certainly if you're a new faculty member, that would certainly apply to you. If you're starting a new project, you'll want to be in the system so you can see the information, contribute to it. For those who have an established project and who've been working, in Report successfully the last few years, you don't have to, in our opinion, jump in right now and get into the system, but you will need to in the next few months as we conduct information collection for progress reporting and annual reports. So keep that in mind. For those who are on the call who are administrators, we called them site administrators in Report. Now we've renamed that role to organizational administrators. You all are still in charge, of course, of giving those folks a role and helping them understand how the process goes. And we want that to still be your responsibility. What we're here to do is help you get that done, answer questions, provide FAQs, materials, quick guides, and the like, all of which are on our website, and it's linked in this deck that we'll send out to you. But all of those things are things that you guys are in charge of. We're here to help you through that process because they're folks that you're giving a role to. And we hope to give you guys enough information to run good communications to those folks. If you get stuck, you know, we want to help clarify some things. As far as the registration goes, if you are having trouble getting your username, setting up your password, getting through the identity verification process itself, your first stop needs to be with the EAuthentication team. There is a form, an easy form to submit your issues or questions to, as well as a whole host of FAQs that might help you as you're going through this. We've linked that here. There is a phone number. You can try that, but it's sometimes harder to get through. We recommend the form. They're very responsive to that, but they're usually in charge of helping you get that unstuck. Once you're successful at that, now we start branching over into your organizational administrator's responsibility to get you into the system, to register you, give you a role. And if that fails for folks, or if org admins are having trouble finding their person or any of those things, that's where we can start helping you. And all you'd have to do is reach out to Lynn or I through the POW mailbox, which we're still using. So that's sort of the separation. Once you're in EAuth and good to go, then we can help you out. But if you haven't gotten yourself registered, or if you're stuck there, we'd like you to try there first, because they're the only ones who can actually unstick you there. Looks like we have a couple comments, and I'll pause. Gotcha. So there's a question about extension. Let me circle back to that one and just touch on the planned rollout of the reporting module. So just to point out that the initiation form, what we used to call initiation and report, the project descriptions for research projects are all in the system for capacity. In terms of reporting progress reports, annual reports, and what we are labeling the results, that results module's in design right now. We are working internally and externally with stakeholder groups to identify all the requirements, to look closely at the processes that were followed previously, to look at federal regulations, including the RPPR and a host of other terms and conditions and policy statements, you know, that NIFA has put out there to make sure we're compliant. But we are working on streamlining that. We're also looking at other trends and things that are maybe happening in the department in the future that may benefit that information collection. But we are gearing it to be part of a larger effort, which is the plan of work, annual report of accomplishments and results. And so we're trying to see that each project has the ability to report their results, to satisfy their progress reporting, but then also can contribute to the annual report of accomplishments and results. So as those ends begin to meet and come together, our designs are finalized through a process we've established with working groups, usability testing, and then of course, internal NIFA reviews. We will be starting to share those designs and those processes with you all. Lynn might want to jump in, but my understanding is right now, we are still targeting the same due dates that we would normally expect. So the ones that come up February, March, and April for financial progress and then annual reporting. However, that being said, this is a collaborative process and we're trying to get this right. So we're looking to make sure that it's flexible for you all and for the schedule for us to deliver. But right now, those dates haven't changed. They are being published in our FAQs and elsewhere in terms and conditions and the like. And then I'll let Lynn speak to the rest of it of how we're going to handle things as they come up.
This is a common question I've gotten for the 2 regional workshops we've done. So I want to first start out by saying, if you have a project that ended last fiscal year, we left it in report. So your PDs will need to complete their final technical report and their financial report by the established due dates in report. If we migrated a project over to NRS and then that PD left, retired, whatever, and we moved it back to report, you will complete all those required reporting forms in report. Projects and programs that continued into the new year, you will complete your reporting requirements in the NRS as we develop those modules and make those forms available. We are going to try our best to get these forms done, but we have several constituencies with varying needs that we want to get right, as Erin said. We also are working in an environment where there are things that we do not control. So while we may have a target date in mind, we cannot promise that we will deliver on that date. You know, if we test and something comes up, then we want to back out and make sure we get it as perfect as possible. So it's an interesting project to be on. I've never worked on an IT project like this before, but we do really want to deliver a product that meets everyone's needs. And so we have asked NIFA to be flexible on deadlines. Our OGFM colleagues are very willing to work with us. We do have to be cognizant that funding, the release of funding, is tied to the completion of some of these forms, these reports. So we don't want to put fourth quarter or first quarter funding for you in jeopardy. So there are other internal discussions going on around the report financial, how much of that information is useful, who needs it. We're going to try to fold a lot of those things into the new financial module. But again, when we get that released is still very uncertain at this point. We have to get the results done first. So,
well, and I think we should also be very positive here. The conversations are very, very good. Like I feel that we have, with each stakeholder group, we are cognizant with them about when the reporting deadlines are coming, what kind of decisions need to be made, by what time, how do we give the universities enough time to adjust and to think through this, give them fair warning if we're going to continue types of data collection, be flexible if maybe it's a little bit later in the game and we may not get exactly the kind of information we all agree we definitely want to get. So those are the types of dialogues we're having.
Right.
And I can only imagine like getting that train going and not knowing if the track is going to be there. We get that, but it's getting, I don't know, we're getting very positive momentum. And I feel that the forms and the way we're doing this is smarter, more efficient. And I think will make people a lot less worried about getting the entry done. They're going to be worried about getting it right for themselves, like getting it right for what we all agree is the thing.
Right. And I also want to iterate to everyone, we have been very successful so far in streamlining the reporting requirements. The project initiation form is, I don't know, a fifth what it was in report. We've slashed the plan of work. The annual reports have really been cut back to high quality information. We are trying to do the same thing with the results module. I hope that we can share those wireframes very soon. I think Erin's team is making very good progress. I'm excited to share everything with you guys. And I'm just going to say one last thing and then I'll hand it back over to Erin. The information that we're going to be asking in the results module is really not any different from what we've asked in report. We've tried to clarify direction. We've tried to make the questions very concise so that you know exactly what NIFA wants from you. And it's all very logical. You know, what's your project about? Why is it important? Who's going to benefit from it? What activities did you do and how did those activities lead to the outcomes that you identified in your initiation? So it's all very practical information. There's some other things that we still have to nail down, where the FTE is going to be. I think they're probably going to be in the financial module. So we've got some little details like that to nail down. But the results module is really going to,
bingo, they still open. I just look like a roof and I can't get a hay.
okay. I was going to do that before, but I didn't want to cut you off, Aaron. So where was I?
Yeah, we have more to work on the financial.
Yeah, we do. But just
I think that's, go ahead.
No, but the results module is going to be very streamlined. There will be no surprises in that results module. We just have some details to work out before we can release it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting here too that there doesn't seem to be anything new in terms of concept, right? But we're helping to clarify concepts, which is a theme we get all the time. So it's not like right now that we can tell, and unless everybody agrees, there's not a new information collection that would be happening. So if you've got some guidance out there, what you expect PDs or to report, that's probably still good. The question is, you might want to take this opportunity to say, yeah, but we want the best that you have. And by the way, we don't want a repeat of what you said last year. We want to know whether you've made some significant, progress. So that's an emphasis that's happening. And again, part of that is the evolution that, especially for Hatch, Smith Lever, and those kinds of funds, we want to see that tracking against the plan of work as a whole. And I know that that's a higher level exercise that that the organization does go through, but we do want you guys to have good raw material that's sustainable and helpful. For those things that aren't showing as much progress, we've always had that ability to say nothing to report, and then everybody always wants to give a little context to that. So we're working on those things. I'd also say, of course, we're looking closely at financials, FTE data, because we know they're collected in multiple ways for different purposes. And we're really trying to boil it down to what's the most essential? What can we do to work with the way that your systems actually work? I don't know when the last time someone said, how do you store this data and how can we make it easy for you to bring it into the system? But that's the essential essence of what we do want to say. And if that's not sufficient for some auditing purpose or for a broader kind of accounting process, we want to clarify that and make sure that it's not redundant.
And we'll get those forms out, or at least what the fields are, so you guys have some comfort in what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, and I think people also were mentioning something about the fiscal 21 projects. Right now, our current guidance is that you would do things as you would today, as you would have last year. So if your project closed as of September 30th, you'll need to do your final technical report, your final progress report in report for all of those projects. They're still active, still open. Nothing's really changed. Yes, some of that data may be context and information that you would share in an annual report, but just as you've been doing annual reports the last few years, based on any information that might have been in a report or whatever data collection, you would repeat that, and we'll have flexibility in the system to allow that kind of data sharing. In addition to the new projects and the ones that have carried on to NRS, they'll have an ability to report their progress. So I wanted to also, before we get going too far, just to reiterate, yes, Friday was a release. So hopefully, if you've been in NRS, you've noticed that there's a couple changes. We did add these 3 funding streams to the dropdowns, or as appropriate for your institution. That means if you're an institution that's not been in NRS up until this point, we've added you and the people who administer your work, and the users who have research projects as PDs, they have all been transferred over to NRS. all you have to do to be able to see that is get your EAuth set up and log into the system. We have also added a few other improvements based on user feedback and based on additional features that we plan to do. You know, things like we think that are going to be very helpful. Now, if you go to your projects programs dashboard, for example, the projects that were most recently updated will appear at the top of your list. We've also added a date column that says when the project was last updated and sorted it according to, you know, newest to oldest. And then of course you have lots of other filter and sorting options beyond that, but the default sort's going to be newest to oldest. So you'll be able to see that in the system. We also have filters by funding type. So if you are working on animal health, you can filter that list to see only the animal health projects, for example. If you're someone who's working on the plan of work, then you may only want to see the Hatch and Smith Lever or the Evans Allen 1890 extension programs, and you have the ability to do multiple sorts there as well, or filters. So all that's in the system. We did some improvements to adding, we've added the accession number. Some of you saw that we had already snuck that in. So projects that were migrated from Report and stayed active and moved over to NRS, all of those accession numbers are the same. Projects that were created in NRS now all have their own accession number, and every new one going forward will of course have that. You can see that on the individual project view. So if you look at an individual project or export it, you'll see that accession number. And so that's, I think, a relief to a lot of folks so they can go out there and share that with other people in the organization that need to see it. We will be adding that to the dashboard view, like the list view where you see the projects. We'll be adding a session so you can search by it. That'll be helpful to a lot of folks. It's probably, that's targeted for the next release. So we added a number of those things, the session numbers being one of them. We improved, there were some hiccups with exporting projects. So if you were one of the people who had some trouble downloading or exporting, we hope a lot of those issues have subsided. If not, just give us a call, shoot us an example, and we'll troubleshoot with you to figure out what's happening and try to make it better. So Nafi, if you, you've got, okay, let me look at did I miss anything? Oh, we also hope this is a good improvement. I'll just throw this out there while we're looking at it. We've always had this question about, well, how many characters or how many words can I use, in these different fields? It's always a back and forth. Like if we gave someone 100,000 words, someone would eventually find a way to put 100,000 words in, or 100,000 characters. If we give you 10, someone's going to say that's not enough. So we know that, but we've kind of settled on a standard. The challenge is that with that standard, if you do certain formatting or you do certain things to it, the way that it transfers, especially like if you copy and paste from Word, or if you do a whole bunch of additional formatting, it can cause an inflationary effect. And so you'd say, hey, this is 8,000, throw it in the system. And then all of a sudden it blew up and said, it doesn't work, it's too big, please cut some data. So what we did is we've given you a grace period, like an inflation. We give you 25% extra character count if you need it beyond the baseline. And what we do to help you even more is kind of tell you when you're approaching the upper limit. And then the character counter will help you do that. I think it's a nice enhancement, so check it out. I think it'll help people, especially if they're cutting and pasting, and that infuriating moment where it's like, well, I cut 100 characters, that's what it said, and it didn't work. That's happened a couple times to folks. But I think it's improved a little bit, and I think we're glad to see that out there, and we'll always continue taking feedback on that. So I think those are the main things. We continue to make sure that there's not issues with saving, like there's some hiccups with the classifications. So if you entered certain combinations or you repeated yourself from one line to another, there were some errors that were coming back and it wasn't clear, and it felt like you weren't saving. So we've adjusted that and made it a little tighter so that it's a little bit more clear. I've always seen that the way that this is done in Report is it's very robust, but there's so many different combinations that I think it was probably very easy to maybe even make some redundant data. And so we've kind of cleaned up some of those things and made sure that the error messages are correct. So if you have any more issues with that, please let us know. So those are the main things. Nafi, can you go back to the other slide, just showing next steps? I want to make sure we just throw this out there before we get heavy back into questions. So we got NIMS data, some of the historical data for NIMS. We just want to reassure people, like that information that was in Report is stored in our database for projects that existed in Report and we moved over. You're just not seeing it yet. And then you're going to be able to see all that data in the front end in our next release. And then as you create new projects, you'll have all those things you're used to seeing in Report. So we'll be fully integrated with the NIMS system. So in Report, for example, if you were to initiate a Hatch multi-state project, you would have a list of the objectives for the project, the NIMS project that was approved. We're going to add that back in, the names of the other collaborating states, links and information about the NIMS project that was approved in the other system. All that stuff's going to flow forward into the new system and be there for you in our next release. We've already started working on it. Just want to let you know that's out there. We continue to be focused on the results, but also notifications, potential email options and the like. So we've already started designing that. We also think a log is an important piece of this as well, being able to see what transactions occurred in the system, seeing what updates happened. So we're working on all those designs on that, on those pieces too. We'll continue to look at the editor, the way it behaves, and that causes in turn some formatting issues, as well as spell check and word count. We're always going to be continuing to improve that. So we're looking at even alternatives to what we do now to make it a better experience for you all. The spreadsheet also, we noticed that it needs a couple updates. So we're working on that to make it look a little bit more like the data that you see on the front end. We did notice that there's a misleading data point. So we're clear that up. It'll be ready to go. And then of course, as we add new fields like a session, that'll be exportable as well. And I think that'll be a real help for people, especially like they share them with the finance folks, and much easier to do that work. So I think I've covered most of the items there. Most of it's focused on results. We'll get the NIMS piece integrated. We're also doing internal things for NIFA folks to make their review process more streamlined. We've focused a lot on trying to get the data in and getting projects approved. And so now looking at how do we make it even better for the people doing the reviews and being able to look at the data from their perspective as well. We're working on that just for awareness. All right, so let me hop over to questions a little bit.
We've got a few.
Yep, I'm kind of around. So this year's annual report, final report for individual projects should be submitted in Report as in past. Yes, the progress reports, we call them, they're done annually. Yes, for research projects. Those are not done in Report, only the final one. So anything that you would consider a progress report for a research project, those requirements and those actions will happen in NRS. Guidance will come about what exactly that looks like. But as we've covered so far, the data, what's going to be asked is going to be very similar, but it's going to have, we hope, a much more streamlined approach that's very helpful, especially for the annual reporting of accomplishments and results related to the plan of work. For McIntyre Stennis, RREA, and animal health, we'll maintain a form of progress reporting there as well. Can we do project initiations, information for new projects on NRS? Yes, correct. McIntyre Stennis is there. So if you're not seeing it, let us know. already submitted a progress report for 2021 in the old system. Yeah, so that's a good point. So if anyone got ahead of the game and started putting information into the old system, please let people know not to do that anymore. Doesn't hurt anything, but we will not be looking at that information. What they can do, and you'll still have access to it, you can take that information and use it for whatever's going to go into NRS. So yes, they would have to bring it back over there, but please let folks not to do any progress reporting, only final reporting and report.
Aaron, did you skip some questions?
I might have, so please keep me honest. I'm at 313 for Diane French.
Let's go back to 311. Gail, does our organization need to register in EAuth, or do we register as individuals? You register as individuals.
That's right. And what we've done is we've hopefully translated the structures and the associations to those organizations for an existing administrator. And therefore, they should be able to manage the roles in the new system.
And then Anton asks the question about annual final reports. Yeah, if you're closing your project out in FY 2021, again, do all that reporting in report. That would be for all the capacity research projects. If you're continuing on into this new fiscal year, you will do the new forms in NRS. So just make sure you do those in report if you're closing out a project. And then Rachel asks, will the annual reports, whether done in report or NRS, stay on the typical due date of March 1? We're probably, well, we actually haven't discussed this exact detail. What I'm in discussions with the grants management folks about is, is whether we keep the April 1st due date for both the plan of work and the annual report. So I think getting those so-called progress reports that, you know, the way we talk about them in report, getting that material in will help you all compile the annual report. So we can keep that March 1st due date if that's going to help you all, but we actually have not talked about this particular due date. So if you guys have feedback on that, please let us know. Not in the chat box, send emails to me directly, and I'll put my email in the chat box. And my response will be clear when we show you the results module. Now we'll probably, because McIntyre Stennis, Animal Health, and RREA are on a different reporting model, we will probably have to keep that March due date for those projects. But for the plan of work funded projects and programs, we have some other ideas about these due dates. So it's a good question, Rachel, thank you. We'll have more clarity on that in the next couple of weeks.
All right, so we were around 313 now, right? Yeah. I think we've hit those other ones.
Bill Stone had a question.
Right, and Diane answered, yes, she's already been in, and I'm Stennis. So
yeah.
All right. I think we covered.
Did you cover Katie's?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to sit there and report, so it's going to have to get transferred over to NRS in the new format once we we finalize that and put it out there. Finals are being submitted in report, correct? Annual report of accomplishments and results, which is the POW requirement, that is going to be an NRS. Topic areas likely to be an NRS for reporting. I'm not sure I follow that. Diane, do you maybe want to help clarify?
I think she's asking about.
Hi, what I'm asking is, yeah, on the annual, is anything different than what we would be entering in report, so that I can basically do a Microsoft form and start gathering the information, because there's no way I can get 80 plus faculty through EAuthentication in 3 months, since I do the whole thing myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think Diane, like a lot of the details about like there's a section called accomplishments, right, in the progress report right now. If you look at the guidance for that and some of the setup there, we've refined questions that kind of get us to that same place. It's more of a narrative format, I will state that. But things like products, we're still working on what those approaches might look like, but they're not as much of a highlight as what was accomplished, which, yes, a journal may be part of that. So you might collect them, but the format it'll take in the new system is still out there. But that probably is not different than the data collection you do now, because report doesn't have a structure. So I don't think you'd be missing anything if you collected what you did last year, but we are asking you to have a little bit more pointed questions. And Lynn, I mean, I'll leave it to Lynn. Like at some point we could probably share those questions. We're pretty darn close.
Yeah, I think we should, maybe what I'll do is email them out with the slides. For the annual report, they're going to be pretty much what we've asked in the past. We did some refinement. We got some good suggestions from the working groups, from our internal guys. So I think we can just share those fields. There's a lot of angst in the system right now, Aaron, around that. And so I think while we still have some things around the edges to nibble at, the core of the reports are really clear. What Aaron's team is still working on is building out the connections between the various kinds of information and the various levels. We really want to build a system, a true system, where you can look at your efforts at a high level, but also do these deep dives. And that's right now what's kind of taking the time on getting the wireframes out. But I think we can definitely share those fields. I just don't think there's going to be any surprises for you guys, but we'll get those out. Okay, I will. Where did we leave off, Aaron?
I think we were talking about the list of topic areas. Then when do you estimate the new questions? I think you covered that. Will the state funded research projects be incorporated in NRS? We integrated state projects and used. Yep, that's the one.
We have not discussed the state projects. We discussed it very briefly with the research working group. If you guys have justifications for us moving those over from report, I would like to hear from you. The information around the state projects in report has been a little murky. We're not getting much information inside NIFA, so if you have a justification for us expending some resources on that, I would really like to hear what those are. So again, send them to me directly. Okay, Jessica asks about the multi-state numbers. Aaron addressed this. We will be making those visible in the next release. Diana, yeah, the export the only way to get that to work is to rename the file name with XLS at the end. We still have a little more work to do on that. Kim, we cannot submit final reports in the old report system due to outstanding progress reports flagging on final report prior to submission. This feature was not turned on before. Can it be turned off? That is not within my purview. That, I believe, was a request from the awards management division. I can take it up with them, but I think they are trying to clean up some of the reporting requirements that were not met in a prior year. So Kim, reach out to me maybe with a more full description of what you're encountering, and I can discuss it with the AMD folks, but I think that was a request from them.
Okay, I can understand where they would want that going forward. Currently right now, I've just had a very high turnover of PIs, either due to retirement or death from COVID. And those previous year progress reports are making it almost impossible for me to get y'all the final reports that you're needing to close out report.
If
so
you
I'll
could
follow email with that. But definitely going forward, once this has been fixed, we're more than happy to do the progress reports. It's just kind of putting us in a really tight situation to not put things just marked as like PI passed away and then putting in a final report.
So if you could put that situation in an email to me, I will share it. At the Southern Region meeting that we just were on prior to this, they talked about COVID-related complications. It sounds like this is part of it. And we'll take things on a case-by-case basis. What I don't know is how flexible report can be. We tried to extend the financial reporting past September 30th because they're trying to collect some outstanding financial reports. And we met with the report contractors and they just couldn't do, I mean, it's not that they couldn't do it, but the amount of resources that would have to go to it were really enormous. So AMD is probably going to be reaching out to people and collecting that information manually. So there's just that inflexibility with that system because of the technology on which it's built.
I understand that, and I'll definitely follow up with it.
Yeah, and if other people have similar situations, feel free to reach out to the AMD group. You can CC me or reach out to me and I'll forward it. Their email for capacity is, I think, capacity awards at usda.gov. I can check on that.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
When is the next release? We're trying to release every 2 weeks. We have our planning meetings on Friday as a team. And so I think Aaron is away just briefly, but we can try to communicate.
Yeah, Lynn, let me jump in. So we were doing about every 2 weeks, but now we're moving more to about a monthly posture, give or take. So the next release will be closer to November.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Sunshine wants to know if more fields are going to be available in the export. Sunshine, what fields are you not seeing in your export? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, it's just the basics that are there, like the name, the start date, the end date. I was just wondering if any of the other information that we enter it's going to be in there, like, is it an arrear report? All those other questions that we answer. A lot of that data is really important when we're reporting in other places. And it's just a pain to go through each individual project and collect that information.
Well, one of the things they're working on is to be able to export from the dashboard. Would that solve some of your issue?
Yes, if those other fields can be included in the dashboard, that's really what I just want a spreadsheet that's got as many fields as possible. You know, maybe not like the long narrative fields, but pretty much everything else. Is it animal health? What percentage is it? What percentage of the different kinds of research? All those fields are really helpful to have. So
yeah, that sounds more like a report function that we don't currently have yet. I don't think there's an immediate plan at the moment to include all of those data elements in a single export for all of your projects and programs. At the moment, it's just all those details would be available in the project or program detail view, which you can export. But we'll take that use case down.
Thank you.
And just while we're talking about it, having an active status or terminated status would be really beneficial.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
At University of California, one of the things that's really important for us about our spending plan is the integrated or non-integrated, because we have different funds that we use to track those. So when we report to NIFA, we can say how many of our dollars were spent on integrated versus non-integrated. So that's a piece that would be great to have on the dashboard so that it can be exported sooner rather than later. That would be great.
Ditto for Mississippi.
Department is another important field. Co-PIs, whenever that's added, is an important field.
Okay, Ruth asks about the start date. So in NRS, there's a project start date, approval date, and an updated date. What should be the start date? So this is another thing that we are talking internally. I've asked policy to reconsider this and try to align competitive and capacity along the same rules. But right now the policy guide says you have to use whatever's the later date. So if your project was approved, I think that's what the policy guide says. The best thing to do is wait till that approval date from NIFA, and then you can start allocating funds. So you can't go by the entered start date. I'm hoping next year we can have like a 30-day window, but we've got to change our policy guide and the terms and conditions. So wait for that approval date from NIFA, and then you can start. The other thing to be aware of as well, so we had a project come through, might have been from the Western region, where the IRB approval date was down the road from the start date. So the project was submitted because it had all that information, but we have instructed our reviewers to watch for those discrepancies and reach out to the PI or the org admin to find out, is that a real date? Is that the date you think you're going to get your IRB approval? So the policy is that you have to have those in place before you can get an approval from NIFA.
Lynn, I have a question on that.
Sure.
I mean, a typical project could maybe not be starting their human subjects research a year in, so you still need them to, just to get an actual IRB approval when the actual part that needs the IRB isn't even going to, because there's a lot of setup that goes into a research project, right, before you're ready to do that.
I understand. And I have raised this several times with our internal working group, and they are just not budging. And the policy group is pretty clear that, you know, the federal-wide policy, and we've gotten nailed by the IG on some of this stuff, the Inspector General's office. So there's not much wiggle room. We're trying to come up with some options for you guys, but at this point, I just don't have an answer for you. You could start a project, do a one-year project, explain somewhere in the non-technical summary that you will be continuing this once you have the IRB or the IACUC. But that's not a great solution either, because then you lose that continuity. It would make writing the non-technical summary a little strange or awkward.
Right, and the fact that those usually expire in a year, you know, by the time you're ready to start the actual study, your IRB is going to be, that NIFA just approved will be expired, you know, by the time they actually do the research. The other thing is, you know, since the institutions are responsible for peer reviews and, you know, assurances, it's unclear to me why the universities aren't held responsible for that instead of the NPLs signing off on it, you know?
I put forward that same argument and was not successful. I've had that conversation with policy. So yeah, I mean, we will continue to have these discussions internally, and I'm sorry this is not working out the way you guys wanted it to. There's a level of skittishness inside the agency from deviating from this, just because this is something that is elevated to the level of Congress. The National Institutes of Health was asked to develop policy for the federal science agencies. So until we can do a little more investigative work on what were those concerns, what are the documentation, what's the documentation around it. And I just haven't seen the original documents from the IG shop or the General Accountability Office, which is the IG for Congress. So stay tuned. Feel free to keep asking this question periodically, but for right now, I just don't have a satisfactory answer for you. So the program of research, that was a head scratcher for me. I've never quite figured out why Max, Dennis, and Animal Health were the only two that required this. So we did meet with program, try to figure out what are they asking you guys for, what do they do with that information, and could we extract that information from the NRS once we migrated. So next week, when I'm done with all of these regional meetings and some programmatic presentations, we will sit down with the program staff. I think I have a meeting on my calendar for next week, and we will make sure that we can help them meet that requirement without burdening you guys. Every other program has this requirement, but normally the program staff have collected that data from our internal data sources. So we'll get our heads around that next week. I will ask program staff to send out a confirmation that the issue is resolved. There's nothing else you need to do. Or I think this is highly unlikely that you need to provide us with information and what that is. But I'm pretty confident we can do it internally for them. Are there common reasons you are seeing that projects to be deferred? So part of the reason is we have not given our NPLs the edit ability that they have in Report. And I haven't looked at the latest deferrals, but in the first big batch that we gave them, a common reason was they didn't agree with the knowledge area or the other classification codes. There's also, I've seen a couple comments where the methodology section was just too brief to really be comfortable with it. There are other cases where the connection to the mission of USDA and the mission of NIFA was not clear enough. And so it may be that a project should be funded by another agency in the federal government. So we're trying not to decline projects. I don't think I've seen many declines, mostly deferrals if questions like that come up. Those are some of the common ones. So it doesn't meet the mission or the connection to food and agriculture, or the activities that extension would be related to, though we're not reviewing extension programs right now. So, you know, is it related to USDA? Does it fit the mission of NIFA? And is it fundable under that funding line? Those are the three questions the NPLs ask. And then classification codes have caused some consternation. So RREA, yes, it's an extension program, but the program staff opted to keep it in the research initiation module because it was in report and they're used to that information and they found a lot of that information useful. So Lynn, you're saying these classifications, these are the same classifications as were in reports. So are they not appropriate to RREA? Do you want to come offline and maybe explain a little more?
Yeah, that's a required field, is the fill in the research classification.
But it was in report too, right?
I guess it wasn't. Perhaps it wasn't. I don't remember. I'd have to go look.
I'm looking at it in report right now. What it is in report, you would click if it's research and then it would give you the categories. Or in this case, you would click that it's 100% extension and it doesn't give you those categories.
And we took those out. So yes, okay.
So that actually, yeah, it really shouldn't be an NRS because it's a 100% extension program.
Yeah. We'll take note of that and see what we can do. Okay. So Kim says, I'm looking at the NRS website and don't see for RREA. So where you see it is in the drop down for funding type. We have all the capacity projects now in that one dashboard. Where you're going to see some differences is in the initiation. So for the latest capacity projects, we hid all of the things that are relevant only to the plan of work funding lines. So you shouldn't be seeing the integrated or the multi-state requirements. So Kim, if you're still having trouble, reach out and we can help you. Is there a guide for assistant site admins? There's a guide, there's a general guide we have. I've emailed it out a few times. We have a version that's available through the website that lists the capacity of each of the different roles, what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, assistant site admins really have broad ability to operate in the system. The difference is they don't really manage roles and they cannot submit to NIFA, which I think is the same rule. But they would be able to create a project and submit it to organizational review. They would also be able to edit projects that are in draft, those kinds of things. So hopefully that's consistent with the report execution. And again, they're delegated to by the org admin themselves.
Yeah. So a word of warning. So if you're at a small institution, and you only have one org admin and you go on vacation, remember to change the role of your assistant site admin so that person can fulfill those roles. We ran into one situation at a university where someone went on vacation and the assistant site admin was trying to submit a project and couldn't do it. So just be cognizant of that. So the FY21 annual financial reports, if you're closing out, file it in a report. If you're continuing on into NRS, stay tuned for more information about how we'll collect that information from you. So if you're continuing on into this next fiscal year, you cannot go back into report and file those. You're going to have to wait to complete that form, or we'll do it manually. I'm hoping we can streamline that quickly with our OGFM colleagues while we're building out the financial module, but just stay tuned. We're going to have those discussions with them over the next couple of weeks. Okay, extension programs. Let me get this down. Yeah, the report of accomplishments are right now due April 1st. Again, just hang tight with us. I'm asking for some flexibility while we transition between these two systems and build out the NRS. I'm also going to gather some feedback from our external working groups on how people feel about moving these due dates and have those internal discussions as well. Whoever went off mute, can you go back on mute? Hold on, Erin. I'm just gonna. Oh, I think they muted themselves. Okay. Okay, just to clarify, progress reports for 2021 are to be entered in NRS. It really depends on, are you closing out? If you are closing out in 2021, you will file your final report in report. If you have to file a progress report for 2021, that means you're continuing into this new fiscal year, and you will do all of that in the NRS. So start with the question, is the project closing in 2021? And then you stay in report. If it's continuing on, keep coming to the webinars, look out for my emails, keep an eye on our website, and you will do the reporting with us in NRS. And if it's still not clear, reach out to me in email or give me a call. Yes, you are now able to initiate new RREA capacity area funds programs. Will states complete their extension 2021 annual report of accomplishments in the same format as 2020? I really hope we've got it all built out in NRS, so we're not manually collecting that. That's what we're working on right now. So just stay tuned. We will communicate more information on those annual reports of accomplishments as we make more progress on the results module. What we're trying to do is link a lot of these things, as I said earlier. And what we're hoping to do is make the annual report of accomplishment a roll-up feature. So what you would be doing is making sure your results are in that results module. And then we'll try to use the new technology to do a lot of the other work for you. Concern about word count limits for extension. We picked projects without knowing what the reporting limits would be. Will we be able to add projects as we are developing our 2021 report? Yeah, I think, Aaron, the system is open, right? So I had this question too. I mean,
I'm not sure. So like the idea right now should be that as you're moving into the planning for the next year, which happens in the April timeframe, you would be shifting. Now, I think it's a good question, like when does that shift?
Right. So this would be for prior.
Right. So the problem is that you have to have 3 years in your head at one time, right? And we recognize that can be a challenging information, exercise. So the first thing is, and Lynn and I have started talking about this in terms of the way that process goes down for universities, because we certainly know it's distributed, especially if you have 2 institutions in the same state. But we all know it's natural. Like, you got to think about what happened last year, what went well, what didn't go well, what's happening right now that might be course correcting or might not still be fixing some of the challenges or getting in the right direction. And then where do you want to go in the future? So you're going to have to kind of go through those exercises, and we'll reinforce, that's a planning exercise, right, Lynn? That, I think people are going to have to spend a little bit more time thinking about how the plan for the whole set of capacity funds, goes. How well does that mesh with other planning exercises? We know that can be challenging with the university.
Right. But I think, Norma, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your concern is that you initiated your extension programs at that critical issue level, but now you're thinking, how do you include all that information you want to include, because those critical issues are large? Is that the concern?
That's correct, Lynn.
Yeah, and we advised you to do that until we saw more of the system built out. We didn't, the initiation was a new concept for extension. And so let me check with a couple people. I don't have a problem with you making changes midstream. We have this flexibility, which we didn't have before. But just
hold off
for now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. 2 things. The first, I totally understand what she's saying. And we definitely have been saying that for the whole time, that extension is new. We have to adjust to the size and the scope and how we want to frame the results for that, especially that first year. But beyond that, now you want to make adjustments to the physical words and text in the critical issues. So if you've noticed, we used to have that completely open. We have locked it back down. We did that pretty close to the May release, which is right after you were supposed to be submitting your plans of work. So we need to open that back up. But rest assured, when I tell you, we are reimagining the entire way the critical issues dashboard and process work, and also trying to think about those critical issues now sort of become a really central aspect of the way the entire system will work. So we're going to revisit that, which means that you're going to have to think about its life cycle. And that's sort of what Plan of Work does for you, the annual update that you have to do. So we're going to be reimagining that.
Thank you. This is really helpful to hear.
Yeah, and we recognize too, you may have made a change in the institutional profile data and then said, wait a minute, there's this copy over here in NRS. We know that's a struggle. We didn't want them to stay out there as 2 different entities for this long. So we'll help you square it. I think some of this might have to be a dialogue. That's what sort of happened between Lynn and the folks who are the points of contact putting the document in together the last few years. So we'll probably have to have a few sessions with those folks to kind of give some guidance about when and how you can make the dates to the critical issues. And then the substance, that also has to be addressed.
But Aaron, the program initiations are not locked down, just the—
Right, you can, the extension programs, many of you may have put in your first attempt. I think, Lynn, you've gone through and kind of got them through, what we've now set up as sort of a approval cycle. You should be able to pull those back and edit them and resubmit them. Lynn will get notified and she'll work on those.
Yeah.
Probably best if you want to go through that exercise, just chat with her. And then in terms of the critical issue documentation that sits behind that extension program, just keep the plug open and we'll have more information.
And if you have not put in the extension programs that you want to report against, please get those done. I do know of one university that has a shell of an extension initiation in there, but there's not a whole lot of information in there. I'm going to try to find that one this next week and let you guys know, but just make sure that your ducks are in order on the extension side so that when we do get the results module out, you'll be ready. So hold tight until we release the fields. We'll try to get that out to you this week or early next week. And then you can see how you want to structure your extension work and then decide if you need to initiate another program to break up the substance. Okay. Terry says she doesn't see co-PDs available on the next step slide. We do have some variations of this PowerPoint slide. Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit about where co-PD?
All right. So, I mean, yeah, it's under consideration. This is not an exhaustive slide, to be sure. So Lynn has some feelers out in terms of what's going to be required for the co-PD. In terms of physically putting it in the system, probably not a super heavy lift for us, but it's going to be a little time. We have to get a couple of clarifications in terms of whether those are full, how those users are situated in the system. And there's kind of a policy implication there. So once we get it out, you'll be able to have it. I want to put it on.
Yeah. No, it's technically it's a easy lift. There's a policy dimension that's related to some security concerns. There's a new USDA policy that's in draft, and I'm trying to get some clarity on how this is going to impact co-PDs, PDs as well. This question that's been floating around the last few weeks of, does everyone have to get registered in EAuthentication? So I'm waiting for some guidance on that. This is also tied up in the concern about protecting our research data from unfriendly countries. So the other field that we have to still work on is collaborating. In Report, it's a collaborating country field. We have to adjust it a little bit to meet the security directive. So this is all tied up in that. And I met with policy yesterday. We're still waiting on some information before we can do this. So.
Right, so it's on the radar. We've already surfaced it with our stakeholder groups and policy. So we're working through that. In the meantime, obviously, we're working on messaging that should help everybody understand what to do, since co-PD is not part of the initiation process, and many people have stood it up as part of their internal processes. So how do you support both? And I think we're going to try to lend some good information about how to handle that. But like with many things, NIFA doesn't need that information to approve a project. That does not mean it's unimportant. The question is, when do we phase it in, and how does that affect your day-to-day? Those are the kind of answers and messaging we want to bring forward to you.
Yeah, the next two, the next two questions are about start dates. I addressed this a little bit earlier. The policy guide says you have to go by either the approval date or a start date that's beyond the approval date. We are working through this issue with our policy folks. They are open to the discussion of putting capacity and competitive on the same track. But again, they have to find the time to do some of the homework, figure out, is there a regulation that governs capacity? The rules, the regulations governing competitive are much clearer. So a lot of times we have to make sure there's not a regulation and then figure out what makes the most sense. So We are working on this issue. I would like to see more flexibility for capacity. I would have liked to have gotten this in place, especially during this transition. And, you know, getting our NPLs on board, getting them trained, getting them into the system to review these projects. So I know this has been a tough year for everyone, but unfortunately we have to work across NIFA. A lot of these decisions are not the team's decisions to make.
Okay, so we cannot backdate start dates, is that correct?
No, you cannot.
Okay, thank you.
Go with the approval date. We have a new set of compliance folks, and they are glued to the policy guide. So if you guys don't know where to find the policy guide, I can put that link in there. Yeah, just, you know, Norma's comment about being appreciative. What the fun part about this job, maybe part of the frustrating part too, is it's an opportunity for us to look at how NIFA operates and to work with our colleagues across the agency, challenge them to think about what's logical, what works best, but also to remain within the lines of the law and the regulations. And I think maybe NIFA hasn't been as good as it should have been in the past about adhering to those regulations. But we've got a great group in OGFM. They're willing to work with us. And so we'll just continue challenging some of the assumptions and the folklore that circulates around NIFA. Kathy Knock, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
So I submitted a McIntyre Stennis project a couple days ago and got no emails or anything to say that it was actually submitted. At least in report, we used to get a notification that said it was submitted.
We're working on that.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm really late to this game
because
I was not on all the emails earlier months ago. So
yeah, no, it's fine. And we made a quick decision to bring the other capacity projects over. We were not going to do it until later, but it made sense. And we got some internal requests to consolidate everyone in the NRS. So
no worries.
My apologies if, you know, we're bringing you guys up to speed quickly.
That's okay. No worries. I just wanted to make sure I was like in the right list if there were emails going out. So I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And we're going to be asking all those questions. So it was a good one to bring up. And we encourage people to also experience this as more of a digital process as opposed to one, you know, that might be experienced outside the system. It's just kind of a general thing because we feel like you can get more out of it. And we're also very curious as you go and experience the digital piece of this, what is it like for you? What can we make in that part of it more informational for you? So we're definitely understanding the need to do it, but we also want to make sure that the way the system is working is helpful to you.
So if you have a project that was deferred because you didn't have your IRB or IRCOOK and you now have that information, go ahead and enter that into the initiation and resubmit. And we will get it in front of an NPL. Oh, and also too, so until we get the notification system, what I am doing is taking the chunk of projects that are related to one organization, and I am sending those to the org administrator. And then I'm relying on the org admins to forward the information to the PDs and to the financial officer, whatever your process is. So I've got a chunk of approvals to get out to you guys. Like I said earlier in the beginning of this, I'm going to prioritize the deferrals because I know it's important for you guys to work with your PDs and get those turned around and resubmitted. Oh, Julian has a good suggestion you guys should read if you're not in the chat box.
So Lynn, I'm wondering for Kim Redmond's question.
Yeah.
Can you just, if her projects were transferred into NRS as, you know, requiring progress reports, can you just change the end date in NRS in order to be able to submit a final report earlier?
I think these are projects that remained in report.
Oh, is the change module still functional in report though?
It does, but if you use it for an active project for Hatch or Evans Allen, please send me an email so I can redirect it to me. The NPLs will be confused. I have to talk to the other capacity program staff to find out how they want to handle those in report. So I've been covering a lot on the Hatch and Evans Allen only because I don't want to clog up the reviews, and I'm comfortable with what I know about those funding lines. The other capacity programs I do not know that well, so I'm going to collaborate with that program staff. But just send me an email and I'll follow up with you.
Okay, so then that answers Kim Redmond's potential issue, but supposing you had that issue in NRS, somebody left the university and their project is another 4 years. Can you just edit the end date, or is there the same requirement that you can only submit a final report within 90 days or something in NRS as it was in report?
So Erin and I don't quite agree on what I'm going to say. If it's a project that we migrated and you're now closing it out early, I need to take it back to report. If you send me the accession number, I will give it to that team and they reopen it. You can put in a request to change the end date, and then you will be triggered to file those reports in report.
Well, we're on the same page there, Lynn. So we're basically gonna pretend like it didn't exist. The thing is that you have to like close your eyes and squint on it until we can actually remove it from NRS, which we do once we have you set properly back in report. We're keeping a list. It's only, we only just turned the fiscal year, so it's going to take us a little time to kind of weed that out of the system. This is a one-time exercise, right? I think if everybody had clairvoyance, yeah, of course, these projects would never have made it into NRS, but things change and we want to be flexible. We're not trying to add burden. Having you do the report and report for those that close out just makes sense because it's most consistent. At the same time, we're reaching and lunging as quickly as we can to the reporting module. So it's set up to take care of everybody in some way. So we're looking closely at that. But in the meantime, guidance stays where it is. And for those who are transferring over or have changed that date, due to various things, we know can have a long tail here. We're not going to hopefully make this any harder. But in terms of the mechanisms of the new system, I think that's sort of what you're getting into a little bit. We're not triggering any action quite yet. And I think you'll be very interested in how we are going to approach this going forward, at least especially for the POW related ones.
And what I've been telling people to do in NRS, if that's a project that is not going forward, it got migrated, but now you're closing it out, just put archive in front of the title. That helps me when we do these exports for the national program leaders. I try to catch those and hide them from the Excel spreadsheet. And again, if you do that, just ping me and I'll go in and approve it so it doesn't get in the queue for the reviews. So Rachel just has an observation. Where would we update a PD's job title? Oh, You know what, Aaron, I think I skipped over a question about emails that got migrated over from Report and they're attached to projects, but they're not the current emails they want to use.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, the preferred way to do this is when you're, so we only have information we know about. If someone's email address has changed and that was not updated in Report, we migrated the one that was in Report. So the preference is, as long as that PD or that person still has access to that email, which a lot of times that's a change that happens, but you still get emails coming to that address. The preference is to register an EAuth that way, and then we'll update your email address to the new one, and then your projects don't have to be physically transferred. However, if you don't have access to that old email address and you can't use it for registration purposes, and or you registered already with the other one, the simplest path is to go into that project director's projects, change it to the other profile for that person, let Lynn know that you're resubmitting it, but it was only an update to the email, and she'll get that expedited as an approval. And it's basically like their new account has been updated that way.
Yeah.
It's extra work. And a couple months ago, we probably would have had a different answer, but we found that that's just the best way. I mean, if you're talking about a project director, maybe only has 1 or 2 projects that are active, this probably isn't a big lift. And if you get a little confused and you're not sure which one to pick and all that stuff, we can help you with that. So just reach out. It shouldn't take but a couple minutes to figure it out. But the most important thing is get them registered and a role assigned to that person.
And if people think they're registered, but they don't remember what their email was in there, I do have access to that information in the EAuthentication system. So reach out if you need help. Okay, I think that is it for the questions. I have another presentation at 5, so I am going to go take a walk, see how my animals are, and get ready for the next one. So if we didn't answer your question or you have more, just reach out. If it's general, send it to pow@usda.gov. It goes to multiple people. If it's something you think I should handle, feel free to reach out to me directly. All right, everyone have a great week, and we will be in touch very soon. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Lynn.